What's up, everyone? I'm CEO Connolly, and today I wanted to talk about writers' reference books. So, first of all, I want to say that I've been reading writers' reference books since I was 16. So, it's been a long time. It used to be the only place that I would go in the bookstore. My mom would take me to the bookstore and I would run to the reference books. I remember when they moved them and I was devastated that they weren't in that same little corner. And the Barnes and Noble I used to go to, they had moved the reference books and I was like, no, I don't know where to go. And I had to go and find them and everything else. So anyway, so I'd always read writers' reference books. And of course, back there, I do have some writers' reference books on my shelves. I also have a box, big ass tote box full of writers' reference books. And I'm going to start getting rid of those writers' reference books. But it's specifically because they've been accumulated over 20 plus years. I'll put it that way. So I've accumulated these writers' reference books. Some of them are out of date. So if you ever get like the really thick book, it's like a $50 book, it may be more now. I haven't had it in a while, or I haven't got it in a while, but it basically gives you like writer's tips and stuff like that on getting your book published. And then it gives you a list of all of the literary agents and publishing companies and things like that. And then it'll actually give you the information on who you're supposed to contact when you're querying, and whether or not the publishing company actually will take the author themselves or if they actually have to have representation. So you'll know whether or not to contact that publishing company or if you need to contact a literary agent specifically for that publishing company. And I used to go through and I would send off all of these query letters, self-addressed stamped envelope inside, blah, 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 and I'd get back a bunch of stuff. Well, that was back before email. And then you'd get somewhere it was like, email us, this and that, blah, blah, blah. So it's hard to get published. And when you get a letter back from an agent that says, hey, you're not going to get published because you're not already published. Nobody knows who you are. You don't have a name. Nobody's going to say yes to this. Okay, well, screw you. I'm going to go find out how I can do this myself. I did a lot of research and that's where I got where I am today. So I used a lot of writers' reference books for self-publishing to get me to where I'm at. Formatting my book, making sure that it was exactly the way that it needed to look. I even grabbed, books that were already published by trad publishers, and I looked at their copyright pages, and I looked at everything and how it was set up and the back cover and this and that and everything else. And I wanted to make sure that I knew every aspect of how the book was supposed to be formatted so I could format my book and do everything myself. I was like, you know what? Fine. If I'm not going to get published because nobody knows my name, I'm not already published, then it's like, okay, fine. I'm going to do everything myself. I'm going to figure this out by myself and I'm going to do this for me. That's how I saw it. And I was like, okay, fine. You big corporations want to be all like, oh, not for the little guy. It's like, oh, sorry, we can't hire you without experience. Okay, but how do I get the experience if you're not going to hire me? It's the same aspect. So anyway, I will say that there are some writers' references that are very helpful. The one thing that you want to watch for that I have noticed too is some of the self-published writers' reference books. No shade towards any of the self-published, authors who have written writers' reference books. But I'm just saying, watch out for them when they say, oh, make sure you pay attention to formatting and pay attention to your grammar and pay attention to your punctuation and this and that. And it's bad formatting, poor punctuation, awful grammar. It's like you're saying to do all of this, but yet you didn't do that. And I can very visibly tell by your writing and the way this book looks. You didn't go through any of your advice. Why are you giving advice if you didn't take that advice? That's my point on that. So you want to make sure that the writer's reference books you're getting are actually correct and they take their own advice and not just give you advice and then be like, I don't have to do it, I'm the one giving the advice type of thing. You get it. So they can be actually very, very helpful. Now, the one problem that I did have was the fact that I found a writer's reference book, a writer's guide to self-publishing. Okay, great. I went through and read that book cover to cover and I was so excited about it. And then I started thinking about it. As I was reading some of it, I kept thinking, I was like, some of this doesn't sound right. And I finished reading the book. I went all the way through it. And then I went back and I looked at the copyright page and I was like, this is why it doesn't sound right. It's because this was published in 1985. It's outdated. That's why some of that stuff didn't sound right. So you've got to make sure and watch for the copyright page. Make sure that it's something that is current, because if it's not current, then you're going to get the wrong information. That's one of the biggest issues. So watch for that. But there are a lot of writer's reference books that are very helpful. And it doesn't matter how old the person is when they wrote this writer's reference books. If you need the information, I don't care if you're 60 and you get a writer's reference book that is written by someone who's in their 20s, that person is actually going to understand what's being done now. So they're going to know that, what's the most current, what's the now. What they're not going to give you advice that's outdated. Whereas if you just take advice from someone who is in their 60s, you're more likely to get information that's probably outdated. So you want to make sure that you are getting writer's reference books by writers who actually know how to write and who know how to take their own advice. Absolutely do not take advice from someone who doesn't take their own advice. Don't give out advice if you're not going to take it. But yes, I do have a lot of writer's reference books. I have ordered writer's reference books from, self-published authors that did not take their own advice. And it was so hard to get through. I actually had this one that I was like, okay, so you're trying to tell me that you have published books, self-published books, and then felt the need to write a reference books for writers. But yet, and I've never read any other fiction. So I'm reading this book and I'm thinking to myself, you didn't take your advice. And it's very hard to get through because you don't have sentence structure. You don't have the right punctuation. Just your formatting is off. It's so just, and, I read a lot of formatting books. I have read, some that, like I said, published in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, even some that were published recent. So my biggest thing is follow what's current. Only follow the advice of someone who knows what they're talking about and actually takes that advice, because I am scared if I were to ever order this person's fiction books, I don't even know what it would look like and whether or not it'd be easy to get through. And I'm willing to guarantee that this person has probably sold more of their nonfiction writer's reference books than they actually have their fiction books. That's just how I see it, because they were difficult to get through. There were 3 of them. Difficult to get through. It was, so you're going to want to look for that. Unfortunately, some of these self-published books are only available on Amazon. So you're probably going to end up getting them on Amazon and you're not going to be able to see them right out, because that happens too. And I've noticed that some of the books on Amazon will only show you the front and the back cover, and that's it. You don't get to see what the inside looks like. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to be able to judge the formatting when you can't see the inside of the books. So that's another reason why I like going to Barnes & Noble, because I can actually see the book. I can read the first, few pages and decide whether or not I actually want to go through and purchase the book to take the advice of the person who wrote it. I have no problem. I have the Stephen King writer's reference book. I have that one. The Stephen King on writing. I have that one. I have the one that has Janet Ivanovich in it. She has a cameo in one of the writer's reference books, but so do a bunch of other big names too. So I mean, I have some of those that have the, famous authors in them, and then I have some that were written by self-published authors. And I like to do the reference books from self-published authors because I feel like I'm getting the advice from them and they're helping me understand the same thing that they're understanding, if that makes sense. Because I feel like sometimes I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm publishing these books. Great, awesome, cool. I'm publishing all these books. I got books published. This is book number 9 for me. I've published 9 books now. Great. Okay. So this person over here, they only published 3 and then felt the need to, put out a reference book. Maybe they know more than I do. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and see, okay, well, they've self-published 3 books, but now they put out a writer's reference guide. Well, maybe it's because they've realized in writing those 3 books and self-publishing those 3 books, maybe they have, some information that I don't know. So I'm willing to take their advice. Sometimes you kind of have to watch the advice, if that makes sense. But anyway, my biggest thing too is the fact that I will take advice from anybody. I don't care. I will take your advice. Just don't tell me, oh, you know what you could do better in your book? Don't give me that advice, because no, I'm not going to. No, sorry. Unless you're one of my beta readers, I'm not going to take your advice on what could have gone better. Because I have received messages on Facebook Messenger on my author account where someone, of course they were another writer, felt the need to give me a play-by-play of each one of my chapters in Friendly Misfortunes, and was like, oh, you know what you could have done in here better? You know what you could have done here better? You know what you could have done here better? Bitch, that book was published in 2014. It's almost 10 years old. Okay, I get it. Things change. Am I going to pull it and be like, okay, well, now I need to fix it? No, I'm not. Because, Mary Higgins Clark has books out there that were published way back in the 50s and 60s. Did she decide in, 2010 that she was going to pull it and be like, let me make it better? No, she didn't. Sometimes your books are just going to go outdated and then people are not going to like them. Great. That's why you keep writing. That's why you keep publishing. That's why you keep growing. That's how that works. I don't need a play-by-play of every chapter that you read in my book and tell me how to make it better. That I will not take your advice on. You want to help me on, formatting or story structure, where you could tell me that, tell me there's a plot hole. Great. That's awesome. I will take that advice. Tell me there's a plot hole. If you tell me there's a plot hole somewhere where, hey, there's this in here, but I'm not sure where it's mentioned again. So it seems like you've got a kind of a plot hole. Awesome. I will take that. Okay, let me look at it and I'll see what I can do about it. That's what I'll do. Okay. But if you're going to try to tell me because you're another author and you're thinking, oh my God, I can make this story better. Great. You write the story then. Write the story. That is my whole thing. Do not come to me and tell me I know how to make your story better. If you do, then you write the story. I loved this story of Friendly Misfortunes. It was one of my favorites until I wrote Killer Suburbia, and then Killer Suburbia became my favorite. Right now, Killer Suburbia is still my favorite, even though I love my cult series, and it makes me smile every single time I murder someone off in my cult series. Heck, the newest book I was reading, the newest book I'm writing right now in the month of December, I'm sorry, but I killed 2 people off the other day, and it was amazing, and I had a great time doing it. That's all I have to say about that. I have murdered 2 people in my book, and I had a great time doing it. But here's the deal. If you're going to take advice from another writer, make sure that that writer knows what they're talking about. And it's not like, oh, well, I've published 3 books and I can give you advice because I know what I'm talking about. Good for you. I'm so happy that you have. Great. Okay, so here's my thing, okay? So I've had another author. At the time, I only had 5 books, I believe. I think I had 5 books published, and they had like 7 or 8, whatever. So they were a little more on me, right? And they were trying to give me advice on the best way to to continue writing. You can write faster, you can write faster, you can write faster. But the way that they were telling me was basically sitting at my desk for 24 hours and writing an entire book in 24 hours, just focusing completely on that book. You could write, several books in a month doing it that way. And I'm thinking that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because I would probably throw up from the stress, like literal vomiting from the stress, or get the anxiety shits, I'll tell you that much. But I'm just saying, that was my whole thing. So my mom thought, you know what? I'm going to go buy a book from this guy. So she goes over and buys a book. She read the first 5 chapters and trashed it, okay? My mom and I are on the same wave that we will never throw out a book. I would rather give it to Goodwill and pass it on to someone else. I will never throw away a book, including if I DNF it. But that's exactly what she did with it. She was like, it was garbage. It was garbage. The story didn't even follow a singular line. It was like listening to a toddler attempt to tell you a story, like that kid on that meme where it was like, have you ever tried to, she said that is exactly how that story went. It was almost as if he couldn't follow a complete thought. It was, he went from here to here to here to here. And it was like, it never came back around. Like his train of thought just derailed and went in the opposite direction of where it was supposed to go. And it never made its way back to what his original point was. And it's like, what are you talking about? So she only got through 5 chapters and then just trashed it. And I'm like, and this guy was trying to give me advice because he had more books than me. Okay. I happened to see this guy at another convention, right? At that time, I had 2 more books published, and he was still sitting on his like 7 or 8. And I was like, okay, guy, if you seem to think that you can write so many books in a month, then why aren't you doing it? And it's like, I'm so glad that this is where your life has gone. I'm happy for you, but you're not actually taking your advice. It's like, you want to try to give me advice on how I can write a book in 24 hours. I'm not going to write a book in 24 hours. Like right now, my stomach is turning at just the thought of sitting down and writing a book in 24 hours. No, that is so stressful. And I have eased my stress by writing a chapter a day, even if it only takes me 35 minutes. I have had some where it takes me, 3 to 5 hours, but it's okay. So I'm really feeling a little stressed just talking about it. Oh my God. My anxiety level all of a sudden, just thinking about sitting down and doing nothing but writing a book in 24 hours and then thinking that it's good enough to go, okay, here you go. No, I need calm. I gotta have time to relax. I gotta have, some people, I swear. But writer's reference guides can be helpful. That's my whole point of this. Writer's reference guides can be helpful. Just make sure that you're getting the right advice, and take the advice with a grain of salt. Don't take it as rule, because it's not always true. Like the show don't tell rule. Okay, look, sometimes you have to tell. When they say show don't tell, they want you to explain or describe facial features. That way you describe their facial features. We're going to know if they're going that they think you're stupid. But you've got to be able to describe that. And yes, I have stood and looked at my face in a mirror and wrote down what I saw just to be able to describe it properly. I have done that. Sometimes you just have to tell it. When you're like, he stood there balling his fists up because he was, getting ready to punch this dude in the face. Yeah, you're telling that you're going to punch the guy in the face. But you showed it by balling up the fists. My thing is that if you just say balled up his fist, okay, maybe he's angry. Doesn't say that he's getting ready to punch the guy in the face. It's just showing that he's angry. All right, cool. So anyway, sometimes show don't tell works. Sometimes tell, motherfucker, because I don't know what the hell you're talking about. That works. Some advice works. Some advice doesn't. Think of it that way. You've got the good advice, you've got the bad advice, and then you've got the, who the hell are you to be giving away advice when you don't even know what you're talking about? The way I think of it is that I know what works for me. I have been working on this since 2005. Yes, I've been writing since, I was a kid, but 2005 was when I was actually like, I'm going to get a book published, damn it. So, and that was about the time that I had started Forbidden Affair. Yes, Forbidden Affair was not published until 2012, but that's because I spent most of that time querying literary agents and publishers. So there is that. It is literally one of the hardest things to do, is sit there and query literary agents and just feel so defeated every time you get a rejection letter, or you get that one agent who is trying to get out of their agency and says, oh, I thought the first 5 chapters was great, but I think you could use some editing. So if you pay me to edit your book, I'll send you over a contract and I'll be your editor. That's not how this works. I know for a fact that you don't pay for any services if you get a literary agent. I know that for a fact. This sounds like a scam. Who the hell are you? Now it sounds like you're trying to get out of your agency and move on to being an editor. Okay, I don't trust this. So, because I've had that too. But anyway, just beware that not all advice is good advice. Most of it, you just kind of have to find out what works for you. And I have taken this person, these little things here and there, and I've added it to what I do for me, because that's what works for me. And you just kind of have to find the little things here and there that'll actually work for you. And if it turns out that, things don't work for you, switch it around, change it out. What doesn't work, take that out. What does work, try to tweak it so that it makes it better, if that makes sense. But don't take someone's advice as rule. Just take it with a grain of salt. Maybe you're going to want to implement it, see what happens, and go from there. But the books can be helpful, but figure out what works for you, if that makes sense. Like, you'll get a lot of writer's reference books. They're like, 50 chapters of a bunch of information, and you're trying to, soak all that information in. But what you're going to want to do is figure out, okay, where am I going with my story? What do I want to do with my career? And how do I want this to go? So, like, if you have to have a day job, you can't sit at your computer for, 12 hours and write. You just can't. So you have to have all these little extra, whenever you get time, maybe you get up an hour early and just sit there for half an hour and write, whatever, and half an hour before you go to bed and write. So that gives you a whole hour during the day that you actually have time to do that. But you have to be able to implement little things here and there to make sure that you're on track and you're actually being able to stick to that schedule, because there are some days where you're not going to want to get up early. So you're going to lay there for that extra hour. And there's going to be times where you're just like, I am so exhausted because jobs are hard. And, that's just how it is. You need to find what works for you. The writer's reference books do help, but as long as you're reading just read what works for you, if that makes sense. So if you're not looking for, how to sentence structure. If you're not looking for sentence structure, don't buy writer's reference books about sentence structure. I do have a book about, creating characters, and it was basically to help me do the descriptions, because my descriptions are so vague. Unless I need to actually pull out all the guns, all the stops, because I need to have that person. You need to understand who that person is as a human, then I will go into great detail on the character. Otherwise, I don't do a whole lot of character description. It's usually vague because I want the reader to think of whoever they want. That's just how I see it. You think of whoever you think my character is. You imagine whoever you think my character is. I don't want to put that thought into your head because I don't want all of a sudden the movie comes out and you're like, that is not who I thought that was, you know? So I've done that plenty of times. I've read books and then thought, that is not who I thought that was. That is not what I pictured. Okay, whatever. So anyway, so I have books on creating characters. I have books on dialogue. I will tell you this much. The best advice I ever got from a dialogue reference book was go sit in public and listen how actual people talk. I actually have gone into a restaurant by myself, cafe, restaurant, whatever, sat by myself with a notebook and just listened to people's conversations and wrote down random pieces of dialogue and how they said it, exactly to the T of how they said it. And it was specifically because, not everybody speaks in perfect English. You've got people out there who always say anyways. The word is not anyways. It's anyway. There is no S on the end of that word. That bugs me. Also, what bugs me is when people say, I didn't do nothing. Then what did you do? Because if you're not doing nothing, you're doing something. And yes, I hated it when the English teacher said that when I was in high school, but I understand it. I understand what that means because you didn't do anything. That's how that works out. So, people speak in correct ways. And sometimes it's not even, it's because they're not thinking. They're not thinking about what the words that they're saying. So it automatically comes out that way. And you get people who get jumbled with their words and they can't get the idea out. They can't say exactly what they're thinking because for some reason, the way that they're thinking about it is not coming out of their mouth the way, the correct way. So their English is not proper. It doesn't come out right. I'm pretty sure that I have said several things in different videos that were not proper English. I'm willing to guarantee it. And it just kind of fell out of my mouth that way because that's how I keep hearing people say stuff. It happens where, especially when you grow up, when you're growing up and stuff like that, and small children, unless you teach them that I didn't do nothing. No. It's I didn't do anything. Unless you teach them that, they're going to continue that. They're going to continue saying, I didn't do nothing. That's how that works. It bugs me, and I know that I've had to teach my son that. I made sure that my son knew I didn't do anything. Made sure that he understood that. I also made sure I sat down and explained to him the double negatives and how it cancels each other out, and that's the reason why I didn't do nothing actually ends up saying, well, you did something. Now I feel like an idiot because everybody hates when you do that. And I will say this much. I have that where I hear somebody say something incorrect and the first reaction is just to go, but I leave it alone. I don't correct them because not everybody's going to have the same way of speaking. So not everybody's going to have the same advice. See what I'm saying here? But yes. So anyway, I'm going to stop this before I get into a rant of the incorrect way that people speak. Anyway, yes, I post new videos every Monday and Thursday. So, yep, that's it. I will see you guys on Monday. And that's all I have for you. Just make sure that if you get a writer's reference book, if you take somebody's writing advice, take it with a grain of salt. Do not take it as, stone. It's not set in stone. Do what works for you. And, and don't sit there and think to yourself, oh, well, I'm older than the person who wrote that book, so I'm not taking their advice. No, make sure that you take their advice because sometimes the younger people actually have the newest technological advancements and they know what they're talking about sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes they know what they're talking about. So don't just say, oh, well, I'm older than them. I don't care. I've purchased writer's reference books from somebody who's 22. That person, I'm twice their age. But I'm just saying. So think about it that way. Think about the fact that if you need to know what's new, what's now, and how things are going, Just think of it that way. If you're thinking of, well, okay, so what I need to know is what happened 30 years ago, that's when you want to get an older one, if that makes sense. Also, I am trying to get 1,000 subscribers, and as soon as I get 1,000 subscribers, I will be releasing videos, audiobooks. All you're going to see is just the book. You'll just see the book pictured. That's it. That's all you're going to see. And then my voice in the background reading each chapter one by one. And I'm going to post each video that way on Monday. We're going to get one chapter each week. So you'll look forward to it. But I want to have 1,000 subscribers. So make sure you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, leave comments, share everything that you can for the algorithm. But other than that, that's all I have. So I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.